From Mali to the Côte d'Ivoire, from Burkina Faso to the Central African Republic, the French still cast a long shadow over African countries they used to call their own. President Hollande says the recent military interventions are based on mutual respect. So what are we to make of claims that French soldiers sexually abused young African children?
The French called it Operation Sangaris because, like the butterfly after which it was named, their military action was meant to have a brief shelf life. But 18 months on, their soldiers are still in the Central African Republic, and what President Hollande claimed was a humanitarian intervention into the country's civil war has become tarnished by a sex scandal. In April, the Guardian newspaper revealed that 14 French peacekeepers had been accused of abuse by 6 African children aged between 9 and 13. They claimed that between December 2013 and June 2014, they were offered sweets in return for sexual activity with the soldiers. This is a matter of huge embarrassment to President Hollande, who's been keen to demonstrate France's positive influence on the continent through regular trade and security summits with African leaders. But now both French and UN authorities are being accused of a cover-up for only admitting the scandal when a UN official blew the whistle. The Central African Republic government is furious because it was also kept in the dark and has now launched its own legal action against the soldiers. But will anyone get to the truth? That's what we'll be investigating this week on Africa Today.
Indeed, and we'll also be considering the wider implications of this story. It's not the first time peacekeepers are alleged to have betrayed trust. Hello, I'm Henry Bonsu and this is Africa Today. And with me in the studio are security consultant David Otto, John Ofe-Ansah, publisher of Africa Briefing magazine, and on the line via Skype is the French political commentator Jacques Relan. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Jacques, we'll start off with you. This was meant to be a short, sharp military action that would save the Central African Republic and show France in the best possible light, but that's not how it's turned out, is it?
It never turns out like that. Short, sharp interventions in Africa ends up in quagmire, as was the case when the French army moved in December 2013 in order to prevent a situation which was described by many as pre-genocidal. We're on the verge of the genocide. The humanitarian situation was terrible. There were killings everywhere. They did it with a UN mandate to restore the peace. Their mission initially was to secure the airport, secure the main means of communication in order to bring food and to bring some stability to the country by preventing the conflicts from spreading, because there had already been thousands of people dying in various crimes. Many people also had already left their places to either other parts of Central African Republic or to neighboring countries. So they went in and...
So they were the aims and objectives of the mission, Jacques Relan. But now we've got a situation where the president is promising to come down very heavily on alleged abusers if it's proven that they've done this. Children, young children aged between 9 and 13 saying we were forced to perform sexual acts on these soldiers in return for food. So hugely vulnerable children allegedly being exploited. Now, is this a huge story in France? Has it been?
It was a huge story really when it first blew in April following the publication in The Guardian of the leaked report by the UN. And we learned after that that the French had been made aware of it by a leak from a Swedish official of the UN as early as early July 2014. Apparently the French opened an investigation into the case in late July 2014, but they wanted to have access to the testimony of the woman, to the report of the UN woman who gathered this testimony from these 6 children, 4 of them claiming to have been raped and 2 of them saying they had witnessed the incidents, accusing 14 French soldiers plus another 5 soldiers, were a couple of Chadians and one from the Equatorial Guinea.
And the report was very, very detailed, and the fieldwork for it was done about, well, over a year ago, in fact. So one wonders why it's taken the French so long to act upon this.
Apparently, they launched an inquiry as early as July 2013, but in 2014. But as I was saying, they were not able to interview the woman who had gathered the evidence due to UN rules. They only got a report from her on the 29th of April of this year, a written report, because they're not allowed, UN officials are not allowed to communicate directly with...
And 29th of April was the date of the publication in The Guardian. For the moment, Jacques Rillon, thank you very much. David Otto, this stinks, doesn't it?
Actually, it's quite horrifying, you know, to get the kind of atrocities which, you know, they're talking about, you know. But first of all, you have to understand that the French government hasn't had, especially when it comes to their interventions in Africa, they've not had a very clean record.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is, you know, if you look at the case of Central African Republic, you know, which we're talking about, you know, the French government has been involved in and implicated in a number of coups d'etats, you know, since from the independence.
Around 5 coups d'etat.
Well,
yeah.
And the sixth one, which is the one that happened with Bouzizi, and so you find out that, you know, the government of France has been they've never left Central African Republic. So it's not a matter of a short mission, because they've always been present. But what amazes, or what is intriguing, is why the host nation was not making aware of these atrocities, something that's been...
Isn't that obvious because they're coming out of a civil war and the governance is weak? And perhaps that's why soldiers, in this case, if they are guilty, we've got to wait for that, took advantage, it would appear.
Of course, yes, because, you know, I wouldn't say it's because of the weakness of the governance. I would say, you know, the French have always seen their colonial states as, you know, being inferior to their superiority. So it is not a matter of being weak governance, but the French would just take it as a matter of their own internal principles, not to inform the government, because probably...
But at the same time, the French and Monsieur Hollande put their soldiers in harm's way until December 2013. There were only 400 soldiers, then they put in an extra 1,200, and then it became, at maximum capacity, 2,000. That was for humanitarian reasons, wasn't it?
Of course, yes. You have to weigh the balance in terms of, you know, the pros and cons of the French involvement in the country, you know, in terms of, you know, sending more troops. But, you know, the benefits that the French government gets, you know, in securing a peaceful environment in Central African Republic is important. But what you have to understand is most of the soldiers, you know, who have been sent, you know, are there to simply maintain some peace within the city areas.
How successfully have they done that, would you say?
It wouldn't be that successful because, you know, Central African Republic is 1.5 times bigger than France. So most of the atrocities happen in the rural and the forest areas, but you don't have the French troops in the forest areas. So it's just a window dressing principle, and just to ensure that, you know, some interest within the region and within the assets, you know, of the Central African Republic are preserved, you know, for the benefit of
John, for your answer, are you as cynical as David Otto when it comes to the French intervention into Central African Republic? Let's remember what it was like a year and a half ago, just how many people were being killed. The African Union mission hadn't really gone off the ground yet. There was no UN mission there yet. Some people say the French were needed, and we shouldn't be unduly troubled by this scandal, bad though it is. In the end, the French did what they had to do.
Yeah, you see, in my opinion, the French did not go there, you know, solely to restore order, any semblance of normality. But they were there, you know, primarily to protect their own interests, right? CAR, Central African Republic, is a former French colony. And we all know the economic benefits France derives from all of its former colonies.
What are those benefits, do you think?
I mean, access to cheaper raw materials, and so on and so forth. Diamonds, gold, timber, you know, uranium. Right? I mean, we don't, let me go digress a bit and go to Niger. I mean, French companies have a big monopoly over Niger's uranium resources. In like manner, French companies is likely to have a lot of, what do you call it, monopoly, a big monopoly over most of the natural resources in Central African Republic. Look, they have a history of propping up Bokassa.
Yep.
Right, we all knew Bokassa was a bad man.
But fast forward to 2013, 14 and now 15, so you didn't have an African Union presence there. The National Army had disintegrated. The French went in. Now we've got a number of soldiers who are being investigated by French authorities and by the UN more broadly. That's a good thing in the end. Of course, people have to monitor the behaviour of soldiers, but they were there to try and stabilise the country, no?
Yes, I mean, look, like Otto said, we have to look at the cost-benefit analysis, or the cost-benefit, yeah. Yes, in trying to maybe seek their own interests, they are also trying to help the common good, you know, i.e. stabilizing that country, Central African Republic, Sierra, okay? So though they were there for their own sufficiency, I mean, they were trying to put the country on a better keel.
When you look at what these soldiers are alleged to have done, do you see it as symbolic of an exploitative raping almost of the natural resources of that country? So you say, well, this is what they're doing, but this time it's to children, and this is what the French do? Or do you think this is an aberration? Thousands of soldiers, and some will do this in an environment where children are vulnerable.
Henry, you see, when in terms of war, you know, it goes back to ancient times, where soldiers, you know, employ sex, you know, as a sort of a weapon of war. And the UN recently has classified, you know, such activities as weapons of war. Okay, but to entice little impressionable children, between ages 6 and 15, right?
9 and 13, I think. In this case.
Sorry, 9 and 13, right? And sexual abuse them is look, it's a war crime. And again, under the Geneva Convention, such activities constitute a war crime.
Well, we will be looking at that and how the UN is handling this more broadly in just a moment or two. But first, during the week, many of our viewers, you've been posting your views on our Facebook page, and here are just a few of your comments. And we'll start off with this one from Asha Machumu in Manchester, here in the UK. It breaks my heart to hear of vulnerable children being subjected to such abuse. There must be a thorough investigation and the perpetrators must be given severe punishment. Nothing less than that will do. We also have a post from India, from Mangalore, and this person is Vishal Kundra, and Vishal says, I am not surprised to hear about the French soldiers who were meant to protect children ended up allegedly abusing them. This had also happened in Iraq. Basically, these soldiers do not value citizens of the third world countries. That is why they are barbaric toward them. And finally, Zelda Pope, we don't know where Zelda is, but she says, people who have no respect for themselves hurt others without fear. And if you would like to add your voice to the debate, here are just some of the ways in which you can do so. Let's pick up on one or two of those points. And the claim by Vishal in India, Jacques Relon, that, well, you know, the French soldiers didn't value citizens of the third world. These are people from former colonial possessions, and they'll do what they want with them while they're there.
Okay, first we have to know whether these facts are true.
Yep.
Up to now we only have allegations. Don't forget it. This come from 6 children. Have they been manipulated or not?
Well, they may be the tip of the iceberg, so the UN says.
Yes, maybe, but we don't know. At the same time, I know that on Wednesday, the 3rd of June, the French Defense Ministry has said it would declassify very soon information about all that case. They launched a criminal investigation. They have now begun to have some evidence, and they will declassify this information, which was under the Official Secrets Act, because it's a defense matter. They will declassify it in order to make the situation clear. We first have to know whether it's true. Another point, I would like to go back on what your previous speakers said. France did not want to go into the Central African Republic. They did not go for their own interests. Their economic interests in Central Africa are not very important, to say the least. And for example, when Bozizé, which was threatened by a coup, asked for French help to François Hollande, he refused when he was replaced by Michel Djotodia in March 2013. And before that, under threat, he asked for French support. The French would not do it. They only intervened because the situation had become really bad, with thousands of people being killed all over the place. It was really very dangerous, and they managed to get the UN backing in order to intervene. It was an emergency intervention, and they don't want to stay. They wanted to stay very short time, but they stayed longer. And they've announced yesterday that by the end of June, by the end of this month, there will only be 900 soldiers left in Central African Republic.
So they're scaling down the operation. They're not quite short and sharp, but they're scaling it down. Is one of the reasons you think that these soldiers, some of these soldiers may have, okay, I'll give you that, may have gone rogue and abused these children, that they were not answering to any African Union presence, they were not answering to any UN presence, MINUSC, because they hadn't been established by that point. They were only answerable to the French defense minister thousands of miles away.
Yeah, they were only under French command. The MINUSCA is under UN command. The French intervened there as backup to the MINUSCA, which is under UN control.
Yeah, there we go. David Otto,
Yes.
Jacques Rillon putting up a passionate defence of the French intervention there. It was humanitarian, not driven by economic interests, because they don't have much of an economic interest in the Central African Republic.
I respect Mr. Jacques' view in terms of the role that the French government is playing in CAR. But it's very inaccurate, to say the least, that the French doesn't have an economic or political interest
in the Central African
Republic, and more so in the region. And when I say the region, I'm talking about most of the French states, colonial states. Talking about.
But just because they were colonial states doesn't mean that there are thousands and thousands of French people still there now, thousands of French business people,
yes,
business interests, etc.
Yes, but the troops are there to protect their interests. As I keep saying, a war is an economic analysis based on who wins and who gains more. So the French government is not there principally to protect the citizens. As I did mention earlier,
he said they refused. He refused Bozizé.
Yes.
Refused to get involved on a couple of occasions, and it was only when the humanitarian situation became more tragic that they felt forced, to go in under UN backing.
Yes, but these are diplomatic issues, which you have to take into consideration. They might have refused, but these are all strategic developments, which you have to.
They might have refused Bozizé because maybe Bozizé wasn't their man. Has it occurred to anybody that most Francophone African leaders, are there, can I say, or the patronage, of the metropolitan rulers, metropolitan country.
To what end? To what end?
You see, look, somebody who will be amenable, right, to
the French
Paris's,
terms and conditions,
interests. Okay, so if the continent Africa is replete, right, with leaders who had been removed because they did not, toe the line of Britain, US, France, Germany, and so on and so forth. And it is more so, right, in the Francophone countries.
Let me put that. To Jacques Rillon. Yes. So, Jacques, you're hearing from the studio here that France maybe didn't respond to Bozizé because he wasn't their man.
Oh, he had been their man, but no, I'm afraid I can't agree with just saying that protecting their own interests. Anyway, in Africa, France has lost a lot of influence and economic interest. I think China is actually beginning to have more economic interest, less influence, obviously, because of the colonial tradition. It's true, we've had France-Afrique, but with François Hollande has decided to move away from this bad tradition of France-Afrique and intervene twice since it's been in power, in Mali, and there it was necessary. You must admit that even though in Mali it was really crucial that France intervened, they didn't want to intervene in Central Africa because they're already overstretched. The French army hasn't got the means. They wanted Europe to support them in that case. No European country has supported them financially. It's costing a fortune to the budget, and there's nothing to gain. That's the point of view in France.
But maybe nothing to gain materially, but when it comes to how one looks, I mean, Francois Hollande never looks happier than when he's surrounded by African leaders at the Élysée, you must say.
It's true, but there's one point I will concede, is that true, France has now, in the new geopolitics, is back to his old role of the gendarme of Africa, in a way. It used to be called. It's true. And it defends their Western interest. That's true. There's a certain kind of burden sharing with the Americans. The Americans get involved in the Middle East and the areas which concern them, and they delegated the control to try to keep control over the many troubled spots in Africa to France, because it has a long tradition of intervening. It has military bases. It's the only country which has so many soldiers on the ground.
Indeed, and the big question then, from a UN point of view, and I'll bring this back to the studio, Jacques Relan, is where the UN is left in all this, because they announced just a few days ago on the 3rd of June that they're creating a panel to review the handling of the child sex abuse inquiry. They're looking at themselves and how it was handled. David Otto, how confident are you that the UN are really going to be ruthless when it comes to looking at how their own Human Rights Commission handled the report that was sent to them from the field and the suspension of their own man who actually fed the report to a human rights organization?
I mean, to be honest with you, one of the things which we, there's an old African adage that, when chickens are magistrates, cockroaches will never win cases, So this is a case of, the UN investigating their own man or investigating, it's not going to go anywhere. We've seen Africa is not being considered to be, especially Central African Republic, to be that powerful enough, to stand on its own as a sovereign state. So all these investigations will take place, but let me be honest with you, it's not going to get anywhere.
Look, I mean, there's a guy called Anders Kompas who is being hailed as a hero. He's the person who leaked this report to the French. And, of course, he's been suspended by the UN. They're looking at that as well. You've also got the UN Human Rights Commissioner, Zaid Rad Al Hussein, who is accused of trying to cover it up because it looked bad. It happened on his watch. How confident are you, John Ofei-Ansah, that this will be a genuine open inquiry that will get to the bottom of how the UN handles scandals, not just this one, but ones like this, because we've seen them before in other parts of Africa?
You see, Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, has been grossly embarrassed. And being embarrassed, the whole UN system...
That's 30 seconds.
Has been embarrassed. So, so because the whole thing has come into the public domain, they must be seen to be doing what is right. So, for this reason alone, I believe something will come out of this investigation.
We'll have to wait and see. They've only just launched it. These things take a long time in the UN system, and we'll have to wait and see what the French do as well, because they promise to be ruthless with those if they find them guilty. Well, that's it. That's all we have time for today. Many thanks to all our guests. They were David Otto, John Ofei-Ansah, and on Skype from France, Jacques Relan. And to you for watching. Till the same time next week. Thanks again for joining us, and goodbye.